Welcome to this Wise Living Water podcast. Our messages are dedicated to guiding individuals towards a closer relationship with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Dr. Norman Wise is thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Through these podcasts, we aim to provide insightful material that will inspire and uplift your spiritual journey. Join us now as we delve into the teachings of Jesus Christ and explore how we can apply His wisdom to our daily lives. Together, we will reflect on the power of faith, love, and compassion in shaping our existence.
You see, we run from these realities, don't we? Because, by the way, our society, you're putting sacred with sex. You can't do that. Well, we're going to see that's where our society's messed up. The two most sacred moments in our lives on this planet is deep prayer, where we feel the union and communion of the living Christ. And if you have never been in deep prayer where you felt the union and communion of living Christ, I urge you to seek that out, because that is an experience that is absolutely significant and wild, and it will give you a peace beyond understanding, and it will give you a joy, and it's an experience. And you have to, some you may never have had it because, you've never been there. But if you haven't been there, you need to find that place, because that's a really significant place east of Eden. In fact, that's like being on the very threshold of heaven, and you can almost smell the incense in front of the throne. But there's another holy place God created, and that was in the covenant of marriage. And within the covenant of marriage, and we're going to look at this in greater depth, in the covenant of marriage, He created this sacred area of sexuality and marriage. And He said, there, I'll let you know a little bit how good heaven is. And that is the joy of sexuality between a husband and a wife in loving communion in marriage. And so this is holy. This is literally us touching upon what it will mean to be in union and communion with God forever. And that's just it. You see, sexuality is not secular. Sexuality is not low. Sexuality is not, something dirty. Sexuality is one of the greatest gifts of God. And that's why God spent so much time writing about it. And that's why the devil spends so much time trying to mess up your life about it. Because he hates everything to do with heaven. He wants you never to believe that heaven is good and that God is good. Now, he wants to in fact claim that comes from running from God. And so he tries to distort what God has made. Well, basically this. First thing I'll tell you is that ideas equal sexual actions. The ideas in your head control how you act sexually. Now, those ideas are both conscious and subconscious. Some of those ideas were deeply placed in your heart before the age of 10, and you may not even fully know what they are. Some of those ideas may have come because you were abused. Some of those ideas may have come because you were exposed to things you shouldn't have been exposed to. Some of those ideas you might have picked up in the locker room while you were in high school. Some of those ideas might have happened all kinds of different ways. You got your ideas. Most of us catch our ideas like you caught the common cold. Okay? If you ever ask somebody, where did you get the cold? You're usually not 100% sure. And if you really ask the idea, well, where did you get that idea? Most people say, I'm not exactly sure. So we pick up ideas. But you have to understand, your ideas, when they don't line up with God's ideas, and by the way, none of our ideas line up 100% with God's ideas, because I don't believe in perfection, only direction. And so we're all in process. Me very much included. But we can either be moving in the direction of more truth, figure out what reality is and adapt to it, figuring out better what reality is. Or we can be moving into illusion. And so I do want you to get disillusioned, because illusions are not true. But you have to understand, whatever you believe to be true, you'll live by that. And we're going to take a look at that. Now, it is true that there's this other factor, and that's biology. So this is the primary. Both your conscious and subconscious have a group of beliefs. They create your worldview. And you have a biology. Now, genetics can be more than just purely genetics. It's a whole biological thing. And most of that you have no control over. Okay, in other words, east of Eden, and we're going to see this, east of Eden, there's things broken. How many people here have something wrong with their body or have ever had anything wrong with their body? Yeah, see, there's something wrong east of Eden. You know, things have been distorted. Things are not the way they should have been in creation. You know, creation was perfect. Has anyone noticed this is not perfect? And so what it is that now we live in a wounded universe. We live in a weak universe. We live in a broken universe. And that includes our bodies, and that includes our genetics, everything. And so, yes, God created everything perfect, but now we're under the curse. And so everything isn't perfect now. And the interesting thing they found out, too quick. Our biology can be impacted by our environment. It's called hardwired to connect. And a group of neurosurgeons, you can Google it. Some of you might be doing that even now. Hardwired to connect. What they found out, because all these kids were needing medication to have control because the chemicals in their bodies were whacked out, and it was on a huge spike upwards, and so they were trying to figure out what's going on. And so what they found out is that the society that America has created for some children is a trigger that releases really bad chemicals to where they can't be emotionally sane. And so we're having to dope these kids up because we have to start trying to replace artificially what their bodies aren't producing anymore. So their bodies are being impacted by the society. And these neuroscientists came up with what they call a structured community. And they came up with 10 points. One of them was this, which is interesting. And these, by the way, were not Christian neuroscientists. They were just neuroscientists. Yeah. And there has to be, within the village, within the community, for children to not have negative impact, belief in an absolute right and wrong. And if there isn't belief in an absolute right and wrong, something goes haywire inside the human body. That's fascinating, isn't it? What they did is they took a bunch of these kids and they put them in structured communities for 1 year. And after being in structured communities for 1 year, the kids didn't have to be on medication anymore. That was a pretty interesting demonstration of how powerful this can be. CNN, who was interviewing these people, again, CNN we know is an extreme right-wing Christian group. CNN, who was interviewing the person, says, "It sounds to me as though you're telling me I should go take my children to church." The reporter's kind of feeling the pressure here. And they said, well, if it's a good, healthy church, yeah, that would do it. So you understand, this is something getting outside the control because you and I don't control the social environment we're in, especially as children. By the way, parents, does it mean that it would be good to connect with a healthy community of faith? Oh, yeah, it would be. According to neuroscientists. Now, also God has something to say on that, but we know we trust neuroscientists more than God, so always good to quote a neuroscientist. You might doubt God, but who would doubt a neuroscientist? Yeah. Well, this is sex equation then. Strive for the healthiest beliefs we can. What's a healthy belief? Figure out what reality is and adapt to it. I'm a realist. Figure out who God really is and believe in the God who really is. Figure out who human beings are and who you are. Figure out what the universe is about. Figure out reality. Believe, look for the truth and find the truth and believe the truth and adapt yourself to the truth. By the way, the truth, it may not always be comfortable. And the truth may not always be popular. But gravity works. And if you deny gravity, that doesn't go so well. Because reality doesn't change because you decide to act in contradiction of it. You know, the world is not going to change for you. You are not God. Sorry, don't mean to offend you. But you're not God. So the universe does not echo to your whim. And then also strive. Notice, I don't believe anything's perfect. I believe till the day we die, We'll be moving from 1 degree. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. We'll be moving ever a little bit more, if we're heading in the right direction, to believe a little bit more truth. And we're never going to get it all until we see Jesus. Even then, by the way, I'm inclined to think I'm going to be learning forever because God's big and I'm small, but that's Norm's theory. But at the very least, we're going to be always in process there, at least to the day we see Jesus. And you see, this is never going to be perfect. In fact, as we get older, it's going to become harder. I know about this now. So the body is not heading in a better direction. The body, until the resurrection, I'm getting an upgrade. Norm upgrade 101. It's going to be great. But until that time, this current model is in the decline mode. I have had dear friends who got older, and they started to not be able to think as well. Has any of you had that? They can't remember things. They can't think as well. Their ability to have self-control goes down. Been great people all their lives. Yeah, see, we sometimes we have to work harder, in fact, to maintain this. But there are things you can do. And you put these two together, and you gain the most healthy lifestyle that you can have. You live a sane, stable, and spiritual life in that. And this, of course, means beliefs about sexuality, handling our biology effectively, and then that'll be the most healthy sexual life that we can have. Well, the power of faith on sex. Basically, I believe something. Talked to a young man in my youth group. He was eating a bag of potato chips. Lay's, nice yellow cover. I remember it to this day. We had taken them on a retreat to talk about sacred sex. So he was over there. Young people say the most honest things. It can be downright scary. Older people know how to lie effectively, so it's much nicer to have conversations with them. And but the young person was there, and he was eating these potato chips and putting one potato chip in his mouth at a time, and only as a young man can do, savoring every bite, sucking every bit of salt out of that, and just having the joy of junk food. Okay? And, you could tell. And he says, I'm going to tell you something. Women are like bags of potato chips. And he says, you enjoy them? And then he took the bag, wrapped it up, and then you get rid of them. That was his belief. That governed his thinking about women. That same weekend, him and his brother would try to break into the woman's dormitory. That was a surprise. Well, no, it didn't surprise me. No. They were after the Lay's potato chips. Yeah. Made perfect sense. Logical thinking. We need Lay's potato chips. They're all hiding over there. It then impacts the emotions. He felt that way. He had certain feelings towards women. He had certain feelings about sexuality. Sexuality is just a matter of satisfying a hunger. It doesn't have any moral institute to it, everything else. And that then governed in action. Hooray, hooray, Norm found me in the girls' dormitory. But you see, it meant from belief. Now, there's a whole group of men that did not end up in the girls' dormitory because their beliefs were different. Trust me, they were invited. I mean, these two young men were not young men they were leaders. They would have encouraged all the men because, if you're going to get in trouble in a crowd. There's a basic rule, okay? Whenever possible, make it a gang event, okay? Because that's always better. It's hard to get, held accountable. Oh, we all did it, So they wanted, but only two of them went there. The rest did not. And they could have had other beliefs. And some of those beliefs might have simply been fear of punishment or whatever. But some of those beliefs might have been, we shouldn't do that. That would be dishonoring to the women. So, you see, beliefs impact everything. And however you're conducting your sexuality in or outside of marriage, you're conducting it based on your beliefs about yourself, your spouse, about sex, about the world, about God, about everything. It all comes down to those beliefs. Go ahead and read this with me. Beliefs are summarized in a life story or grand narrative, which is how we interpret all events in our lives. You see, you walked in with a pair of glasses, and you also walked in with a hearing set on. And it filters everything I say. you see and you hear through presupposed ideas that you had before you ever walked into the room. And you will interpret everything I'm saying through that set of presuppositions. And only when you're ready to challenge yourself, only when you examine what is my prescription, what is it that do I have a good reason for believing what I believe? I was talking to a guy who was in a drug rehab, forced to be in drug rehab. He wasn't happy. Very few people in that situation are. And he was explaining to me how really taking drugs was a good idea. That I was wrong and everybody else was wrong, the counselor was wrong, the world was wrong. Taking drugs was a great way to live life. And as soon as he got out, he was going to go back on drugs. He says, that was a great way to live life. And I said, I want you to do something for me. I said, give me the names and telephone numbers and addresses of 3 people that lived your lifestyle and are 20 years older than you, and they have a good job, and they have a good marriage, and they have stability, and they're happy. And he looked at me and he said, are you crazy? Those people don't exist. And I said, then why do you think you're going to be the exception? You see, a lot of times, the unexamined life is easy to live. You never challenge your own beliefs. You never challenge what you feel. You never challenge. But it's never lived well. And there's always going to be payday coming. Okay, what is your worldview? Do you know it? What is your worldview concerning sex? Now, I know the Sunday answer. The Sunday answer doesn't mean a hill of beans if you abandon it on Monday. If your feet, I'll tell you what you really know, what you want to know what your worldview is, where your feet go. I don't believe people's lips. I believe their feet. And so if I see where they go and what they do, that's what I know they believe. Oh, people can say all the right words. They can say amen. They can quote the Bible. They can do whatever. But I just watch their feet. And by the way, sometimes you have to look real hard because they are living dual lives. They have a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of thing going on. And so they're trying to hide their true lives. But you see, you know what your true life is. And so the question is, how are you looking at the world? Is it the way God looks at the world? Do you believe that it's a good idea to avoid sexual immorality? Or do you think God is just the eternal killjoy and He's trying to keep you from really enjoying life? Do you believe God is good? Or God is just the Godfather? Some kind of big mafia guy that wants to run your life and doesn't love you. See, all those things, those are key issues. Well, examples. Rape is caused by women because of how they dress and act. This is one of the most common myths in America. If a woman is raped, it's because she did something and she shouldn't have done it. And the majority of women who are raped will not report it because of this belief. Because by the time the authorities are done with her, she believes that. The authorities are not very sympathetic to rape victims in the majority of cases. And this is deeply embedded within our culture. They did a whole study, by the way. Psychiatrists sometimes do really bad things to get knowledge, and I wish they wouldn't do them. But nevertheless, once they have it, I'll tell it to you. What they did is they took a group of men, and they surveyed them about how they felt about rape. And they came up, and the majority of men were, leaning in the direction of saying, no, rape is wrong and stuff. So they were kind of anti-rape. And then they took them away, and they put them in a house, and they showed them 24 hours of pornography where the theme of the pornography was rape, and where in the pornography, which is a normal theme in pornography, is that the woman, because of how they dressed and acted, deserved to be raped. And in fact, enjoyed the rape. I'm glad you haven't watched enough pornography to know this is true, but you'll have to take it on faith. This is in fact true. They then surveyed the men after, and they found that the attitudes of the men had radically changed to believe that women were responsible for rape. As pornography grows in the culture, the attitude towards women especially, because Pornography is still at this moment more popular with men than as women. However, by the way, under 30, this is changing, so we could really be an opening Pandora's box. And so the whole attitude that people have towards the other sex is radically changed because of things like pornography, and we'll talk more about pornography later. You guys can read this with me. Go ahead, read that out loud. Sex is just good, healthy fun between adults and should not be taken so seriously. Come on now, God's got nothing better than to send me to hell over this? You gotta be kidding me. What does he care? Well, we'll find out later, but you see, a lot of people believe that. Okay, let's read this one together. All men watch porn. They cannot help themselves. The poor victims. Oh, I tell you, they cannot. I mean, it grabs out and grabs their eyeballs, and they're just victims of this horrible thing called pornography. And every man does it. No exception. And by the way, that's not statistically true. Read it with me. If a person is born homosexual, then they have to practice a homosexual lifestyle. Is that a popular or not popular belief? That's popular. That's basically what we are told every night on TV. And, have you ever watched Law and Order? Oh, Law and Order tries to totally get you to convinced of this. I mean, it's interesting. We'll talk, Gallup did a survey. They find out that most Americans believe 1 out of every 4 people is homosexual. We're going to find out at the end that's nowhere near true. But you see, ideas in people's heads, it controls their actions. Read this. Teenagers cannot stop themselves from having sex. It's impossible. It's totally impossible. All teenagers have sex. Universally. Well, that's not true either. And also, isn't it sad that people don't have any control over these important things? I mean, there is these poor teenagers saying, I don't want to have sex, I don't want sex, and they have sex. Isn't that bad? I mean, that's amazing. That people have so little control, even when they deeply don't want to do something. But we believe that. In fact, we believe that so much, we don't even teach the idea of abstaining from sex in our sex education classes. We simply try to teach them how to do sex safely with the anticipation that they will have sex. By the way, the idea is in those heads. If we cause the teenagers to believe that to be true, they will live that out. Because the ideas in your head, they impact your behavior. Okay, read this one. Men are dogs when it comes to sex. Some of you are laughing because you've said it. Okay, that's all right. The thing is, the ideas in our head influence our reactions. Loving sex in marriage, like prayer, is sacred and holy. Now, how many times have you not on Sunday, not in front of some preacher, not in a seminar, Monday morning, had that thought about sex? And if not, then your real thinking about sex is not in line. Because this last one, of course, if you may not have guessed, that's God's view of sexuality. Well, where do our sex beliefs come from? Parents try to have an influence, good or bad. You, of course, have had some men give their sons condom and told them to try to see how many people they can have sex with before they're 18, and they keep score. You have other parents trying to take people out. Dobson has a thing called Preparing for Adolescence, and I took my son and my wife took our daughter out on that and had them take a vow of chastity and so forth until they got married. So you see, parents have a voice, not control. Not control. You cannot control the destiny of your kids. You can be a good influence. You can be a sane, stable, and spiritual parent. You can try to live the right way and be the right thing and all that. That's the only... But they make their own decisions. I hate to tell you this. You have no ultimate control. That doesn't do away that you should try to be, better to teach them truth and teach them lies. By the same extent, by the way, sometimes we might not even know that we're messed up about sex. And so we believe it's true and we pass it on. Because we haven't done enough self-examination to say, well, does that idea really reflect God's view? You can be sincere and sincerely wrong. You can be trying to do what's right and do it wrong. God has put into people's heart, Romans chapter 2, the law of God is instilled inside of us. We actually have a conscience. It's very interesting because they have wired people up, and they have wired people up who were sexually abused, and this was before the age when they would have understood sex being good or bad. And they trace the electricity in the brain. And when they talk, and there's one place the electricity goes when it goes into this was wrong column, and another place when it goes into this was right column. And so the thing is, by the way, if you're being sexually abused, it may physically, you may have pleasure. There's a whole book that talks about how our bodies betray us. A person can be abused or raped and yet have pleasure during that encounter. And that doesn't mean they wanted it. Biology works, okay? Mechanically, in actuality. There's no magic in it. And what it was, though, they found that the electricity of these people who didn't even have the categories went over to the violation category. God has put a conscience. Now we can sear our conscience can get twisted, and it can be, given lies. Our conscience can be damaged like everything else. But God has, in fact, given a moral witness about sex into the very fiber of the human being. You read Romans 2, if you want documentation. Our culture comes in, we've talked about that. Culture is singing a song either for or, either true or untrue. And our culture, since the 1960s, we're going to look at this, has been singing a song about sex that is very much out of touch with reality. Our experience, it could be we were abused sexually. I had a person who was raised in a quote-unquote Christian home, but a Christian home that had a lot of different abuse. And this person, she was originally abused when she was 2 years old. And she was then continually abused periodically throughout her growing up. That had a huge impact. That experience had a huge impact on her beliefs about sex and about herself. So our experiences and what we've gone through, they have a big impact. And we process them. The church. The church can either be doing something good, something bad. They can be giving people information. They've been helping people learn how to practically do the thing. Or the church can be just listing all the sexual, illnesses one can get and think that's going to prevent people from having sex. Now, there's nothing wrong with knowing, the 273 diseases you can get or whatever it is. But the thing is that it doesn't usually keep people out of the bedroom. And so there's all kinds of things. But the church can be a voice. It can be a wise voice. It can be a compassionate voice. It can be an insightful voice. It can be a practical voice. But it's part of the voice if church is part of life. Now, it could be that church is not part of life. And, by the way, only 20% of Americans go to church on a regular basis. 80% of Americans are unchurched and also unsynagogued because people who take, the statistics don't care, house of worship. And so there's only 20% of the population of the United States that even has that experience on a regular basis, even have the kids on there on a regular basis. The social village in which we live, this basically is that culture, especially that 250 people that make up our village around our house. These are our best friends, our family, extended family. These are the people that we interact with. This is the people. The culture is the bigger group. But now these are the people that make up that close group, that structured community, that community directly around us. We influence. See, most of us want to be in agreement with our peers. Isn't that true? There's peer pressure, by the way, on adults as much as there is on children. We all want to be, when we give an opinion, we want people to say, yes, that's true, yes, that's true. So peer pressure still plays a tremendous impact. We don't want to be the odd person out. I had a person who, was really upset because they've been trying to kind of get into church. They weren't in church. And she says, I feel like, that island of unwanted toys. There was an old cartoon, And so I feel like that I'm on that island of unwanted toys because I just don't fit in. And so none of us like that feeling. And she was really feeling anguish about it. She wanted to fit in, but she wasn't able to because, she wasn't willing to give up her own ideas and thoughts. So there's tension there. And also, by the way, Well, you can be creative. You can create your own idea, good or bad. You can just make one up. Nobody else ever made up during the whole history of the human world. Hurrah! That could be your idea. Creativity. So our ideas, by the way, the ideas, your beliefs you currently have are a mixture of true beliefs, partly true beliefs, because there's some truth in it, but we've got it mixed in with something, not so good, and out lies. And that's true of me as well as you. See, that's why the favorite person I have in the Bible is the guy who was trying to get his son healed by Jesus. And he came to him and said, Lord, I believe. Help thou my unbelief. Because I think that's all what it's all about. We do have some belief, but we need more belief. Well, the sexual revolution in the 60s, and I was part of the wonderful people who brought you this, there is nothing more about sexual behavior between two consenting adults. If two consenting adults say yes, anything goes. In fact, it can be 3 or 4 consenting adults. There can be 50 consenting adults, and it's all okay. Because the only thing that requires is as long as you have consent. Now, by the way, there's a trick here, because if you know much about people consent to things all the time they don't want to. You ever say yes to a salesman that you didn't want to say yes to? We can feel pressure to do something, and we are officially consenting. But it's really kind of not the most free action we ever felt, because we can feel we have to. If I don't do this, this person won't love me anymore.
Thank you for choosing to be part of the Wise Living Water podcasts with Dr. Norman Wise. We hope these podcasts serve as a source of inspiration and enlightenment as we grow in our faith together. Our content is designed to offer wisdom, encouragement, and guidance for those seeking a deeper connection with their faith. Whether you're just beginning your spiritual exploration or have been on this path for years, there's something here for everyone. If you have any comments or suggestions about today's message, please send an email to wiselivingwaterchannel@gmail.com.